Okay, you guys ready to get started? Everybody jumped. All right, well, first of all, thank you for coming. I see a lot of familiar faces. Some of you have been here for a few of our workshops. Doing something a little bit different now after almost 20 years in Evansville and doing a lot of workshops in the community, different places. This year we decided to start bringing everything in-house. So though we spend a lot of time in hospitals and businesses and the library system, we thought to be consistent and to answer the question, just tell me what to eat, instead of every time we go someplace having to give kind of an introductory lesson or kind of a formatted presentation. We wanted to get into some deeper stuff for our clients and maybe get more topical. So we started doing that at the beginning of this year, and now tonight we're actually going to start broadcasting it out so all of our other operations around the country can participate. So we have a few of our TheDietDoc licensees, operations around the country doing the same thing we are here tonight. Having a lot of people around projecting this, so getting some information. You guys saw the topic tonight is meal planning, right? Very specific things. Literally, that is the question we get most often. When somebody hears we know a few things about weight loss and maybe they want to talk about programming, the first thing they say is, well, just tell me what to eat. I don't want to necessarily have to learn all this stuff, and I don't want to have to track things and get into all those heavy details. Just tell me what to eat, and I'll be fine. And the problem is, of course, in our country, you guys know these statistics, especially if you've been around us, but 98% of people who start losing weight, who go on a diet in our country, within 2 years have gained it all back. 98%. I mean, I don't know how much worse that can get. It used to be 95%, and a new study came out and showed 98. So, yeah, welcome to nutrition. You have a 2% chance of succeeding. Of course, we started our company almost 20 years ago with the concept in mind that it had to be permanent. So instead of just giving cookie-cutter plans or just telling people exactly what to eat, there's always been a layer of you have to dig in and you have to learn some things. But maybe with old age, I've softened just a little bit, and now we're trying to give more help, more support, even in those beginning phases. And part of that is meal planning. That's a huge step. As soon as you learn about maybe your body type and how nutrition works on a basic level, you really do have a lot of options on how to format meals. And there are a lot of different trends out there right now. You guys name a couple diets that you might have tried? Give me some real current ones. Give me some Weight Watchers, okay? What's that? Paleo, yes, there's a good current one. Anything else?
Blood type diet.
Blood type, okay. Anybody hear of intermittent fasting? Okay, that's you'll hear about it soon. That's the next one kind of coming through the pipeline. But there are a lot of different ways you can eat, and not all of them are bad. Not all of them are horrible. But if it's just too pigeonholed as far as telling you exactly how to eat and you have no flexibility, especially with a paleo type diet, which is ketogenic, where you just can't eat any carbohydrates, you learn really quick that it's very impractical. And that's where that 98% failure rate comes in. So what we do with clients is work with certain layers of flexibility, where you do get to choose what you eat. You learn how to eat in restaurants and succeed. You learn how to eat carbohydrates and succeed. And that creates a little bit of a dichotomy, because all of a sudden people who said, well, just tell me what to eat, as soon as you do that, if we were to give somebody a perfect meal plan, here's exactly what you eat every single meal, the very next day they would come back and say, okay, well, I don't want that for lunch today, now what should I do? And so the exact thing they say that would help, and that's what they have to succeed, they quickly learn that's why there's a 98% failure rate. You have to learn to think. So I want you to consider those two pillars of success. Structure, you do need to learn something about physiology and your body type and the mechanics of weight loss, which we're going to touch on tonight. But then also the flexibility and practicality side. How can I make this work for my life, for my body type, for my schedule, even the foods I like? What if life throws me a curveball and all of a sudden somebody brings something to work, or my spouse wants to go here tonight, and how do I manage that? So you've got to have those two things in play at all times, structure and flexibility. So within those current trends, when you see those types of nutrition plans out there, I want you to start thinking about, well, what's maybe a good thing I can take away from this. It may not be a perfect plan I can just jump into and do wholeheartedly, and I wouldn't want you to, but maybe there are some good premises that can be helpful. In our upcoming book, we have outlined what I think are 5 critical meals. And for those of you taking notes tonight, this is where I'm going to tell you exactly what to write down. That's kind of the heart of the lecture. You guys who are used to us might notice that we don't have a PowerPoint tonight. And part of that is very intentional, because I think with our normal protocol of having a lot of video and audiovisual type things, I don't want to distract you from such a short, concise lecture tonight. 30 minutes is all we're going to go, and I'll talk about specific meal planning. So talk to me a little bit about maybe the meals you think are important. Well, if I said you need to have a certain amount of meals in your day, or there should be a certain protocol for meals, what would you guys tell me? What's the way to eat?
A bigger meal at noon.
Bigger meal at noon?
A big meal at breakfast, a bigger meal at noon, and then taper it off at evening.
Okay. So you've heard of just different volumes of meals at different times of the day? Anybody else?
Eat every 3 hours, small
Yes.
portions.
That kind of came about in the 90s, where the bodybuilding community kind of infiltrated the real world, and everybody started thinking they had to eat every 3 hours. And there are some pros to that, but I don't want you to lock into thinking that's how you have to eat. What are some other things? Anybody do anything out of habit just because you think or you've been told that that's the way it should be?
Don't eat after 6 p.m.
Ooh, there's a good one. Don't eat after 6 p.m. because it'll all be stored as body fat. It's horrible, right? That's a great thing. I mean, that's something that everybody thinks about, but I'm going to show you why that's not necessarily true in the context of a whole day. You guys are giving me all the great ones. Let me talk about for a second just the types of nutrition plans out there that you guys already mentioned, like paleo and ketogenic dieting. There is a methodology that started way back in the early 1900s that discussed or discovered if we take carbohydrates out of our diet, then we'll lose weight very fast. And as early as the 50s, there were even commercials and so forth in magazines touting this new plan that Dr. Atkins was promoting. That may have even been his predecessor, and then his popularity kind of came around in the 70s and resurged in the 90s. But it is true that carbohydrates, as we consume them, they are our body's primary source of energy. That's what our body's always going to use first. So if we take carbohydrates out, we will start accessing body fat sooner and faster. The problem is when you take that too far, you start suppressing your metabolism, you start losing muscle mass, and so that's why in studies on ketogenic dieting, study after study always comes back and says 85 to 95% of people end up losing muscle mass and regaining all their body fat with a slower metabolism. So talk about failure. If you want to lose weight only to gain more body fat back, having lost muscle, and now your metabolism is even slower until it recovers, then that's the plan for you. Anybody want to sign up for that one? Okay. But again, there's a truth to that. I mean, carbohydrates are a factor, and we have to manage them well. We have to moderate them. There's a time to eat them that is more effective, and that's part of our 5-meal plan. There are times when carbs are very important, and there are amounts that are very important. This next craze going around, intermittent fasting, they're kind of the antithesis to the eat every 3 hours crowd. Notice how the pendulum always goes that way? As soon as, everybody's over here, somebody runs over here and screams with the loudest bullhorn. I have the magic, and it's always the exact opposite. I mean, it's one extreme to the other. So now the new plan is intermittent fasting, which does mean different things to different people, but primarily it's just eat one time a day. Yeah, I see a lot of frowns. That doesn't sound fun, does it? All of a sudden that takes the joy out of dieting. Yeah. So a couple obvious problems with that. One is you don't get to eat very often. And anybody who's even been on anybody do like an Atkins type diet, low carb, And did you do any prison time for killing anybody? Clear on that? I mean, you guys notice how hard it is, and you get grouchy, and you just hate life? Because your brain needs carbohydrates. And so try going 24 hours without any food, but then, of course, you get to pig out, because you get to eat all your calories in one meal. So talk about creating extreme behavior. And if you know anything about physiology, you know what happens when you eat too much food, then your body can process and assimilate at one time. I mean, what's going to happen? We're going to store that as body fat, and it's always, always much, much harder to lose weight than to gain weight hormonally. It's not your fault. It's not just because you're eating the wrong way. Your body is a survival mechanism. It is absolutely designed to survive. And so anytime you eat more food, more calories, more carbohydrates than you need right now, you will store them for later. But then, through the term I coined a few years ago, metabolic positioning, it can take 2 to 3 days to work back through the stored carbohydrates just to start accessing that body fat again. Anybody remember that term from other lectures, metabolic positioning? So you guys could come up here and demonstrate that. You know it that well? That's not a trick question. I want you to say yes so we can move on. Okay. Very briefly, for those of you who don't know, metabolic positioning. This is just my way of describing how your body accesses energy to get to stored body fat. If anybody in here, like myself, I'm not particularly gaining weight or losing weight. My weight's pretty stable. So on a day-to-day basis, that means I am probably not overeating or under-eating food to a large degree. There may be some variance, but overall, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not gaining or losing. So you would say that the stored intermediate energy levels in my body, stored glycogen, which is carbohydrates, those are relatively stable and full. We store a certain amount of energy in our body as body fats, virtually unlimited. If we keep eating, we'll keep storing. But we also have stored carbohydrates in our body for more intermediate short-term needs. So, for example, when I consume a meal, those carbohydrates go into my stomach, it's digested, my small intestine starts flushing those into the bloodstream, and so my blood sugar is now, it's stable or rising. So I'm giving my body the energy it needs. Trillions of cells in your body, they all need energy, and that's going to be glucose primarily, first source of energy, and your body's happy. Your cells are getting the glucose they need. When that starts getting low, anybody here not eat since lunch or so? Couple people? Okay. So it's been 5 or 6 hours since some of you have eaten. And what's happened is you have long since run out of energy in your bloodstream. The lipid levels are lower, the blood glucose levels are lower, so now you've had to go to an intermediate storage, and that's stored carbohydrates. We store those in our liver, our muscle tissue, and the only thing that's important to remember about that is it takes a couple days to use that up. So if I could give a short demonstration here. If I am right here where I'm just eating a meal and I'm very stable, blood sugar levels normal, my body's going to use those carbohydrates first. That's position number 1. If I'm where you are, you have gone through the afternoon and you haven't eaten for a while, so blood sugar got low, and you've had to move over here to position 2, where now your body's using stored carbohydrates. And then if you eat dinner tonight, and it's especially after tonight, it's going to be a nice moderate dinner. You're going to be all motivated and eating well. And so all of a sudden, your body will use a little bit of those carbohydrates again until they're gone, until you've used them, and then you're right back into position 2. Since the stored glycogen or carbohydrate levels takes a couple days, as long as you're not overeating, then you're just going to keep going back and forth from position 1 and 2. And that's good news. You're actually going to start losing weight because as you use those stored carbohydrates, you start losing a ton of water. And everybody knows that when you start dieting, weight comes off pretty fast at first, right? Has anybody ever said, oh, it's just water weight, so it's not really a big deal? Yeah, I mean, we're kind of conditioned to think that, but it is a big deal because you're working your way into position 3, which is when you're done using stored carbohydrates in your body, then you're going to start tapping into stored body fat. So that's exactly where we need to be with our nutrition plan in general, but also considering tonight's topic, which are the 5 meals we're going to talk about, meal planning. So what's important to know is on a macro level, your food plan in general has to be moderate enough in carbohydrates that you can work your way through to those end levels of using body fat as energy. And this is incredibly important because for anybody who's ever struggled losing weight where you say, well, I can always lose 5 pounds and I gain it back, I lose 10 and gain it back, or I lose 2, gain 2, lose 2, gain 3, I'm just always back and forth, you never get any traction. You need to get in position 3 and stay there. That's where these statistics such as you can lose weight 50% faster eating the same amount of calories just depending on how you structure them. That's a true statement, and it's because you're staying in the metabolic position to burn body fat. Because what happens if I spend 2 or 3 days eating well and I cruise over here and I'm losing body fat, and then all of a sudden I go out and I have 6 or 7 or 50 slices of pizza, or just, or I go have a salad at the restaurant, but I also eat 2 baskets of chips. We always blame that on sodium, right? I woke up and I'm gaining so much weight and I'm all watery and my rings are stuck and I've got those gross little lines on my socks and it must be the sodium, right? It's the carbohydrates that the sodium rode into your body on. Because it's the carbohydrates, just like when you use up the stored carbs and that releases a bunch of water, when we restore those carbs and we fill back up, not only do we gain that weight back because of water, but we've also moved back to the starting point. Now I have to start all over. I've got to spend 2 or 3 days working through the stored carbs to get back here. That kind of inefficiency will kill you short-term and long-term because you will never get anywhere. That doesn't mean that when you get over here to station number 3 that you're only eating, little birdseed food all day and you can never have fun. It's a matter of controlling your food, knowing what's in it. That's where the tracking comes in, and knowing how you can deviate. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, the meals. So you guys are all clear on metabolic positioning, all right? You guys are all experts. If you know that concept alone, you are ahead of about 90% of the nutrition professionals in the country. People who would tell you that ketogenic dieting is good for you or intermittent fasting is the way to go, you can tell those people now, hey, that's totally not true because of this. And you can make them look silly because you know just something about how your body works physiologically. So that's the structure part. And I want to spend a little bit of time tonight talking about the practicality, which are the meals. Somebody mentioned already that we can have a big meal and then maybe tapered off and so forth. I love that you said to have a big meal once a day. That's the foundational element of intermittent fasting. The reason there's been this rebound from the eat 6 meals a day or eat every 3-hour crowd is because if you eat all day long, you're just kind of grazing or you're eating just small meals like that. If you've ever done that, especially if you have a pretty fast metabolism, you find that you can get pretty hungry pretty fast. Every meal, you just seem to get hungrier sooner. Pretty soon you eat and you're still hungry after you're done eating. So 1 meal a day is a really good idea to get filled up. And I don't mean like lay on the couch, ready to throw up filled up. But you need a meal, what I call the anchor meal. In our book that's coming out this summer, we talk about 5 different meals. The first meal type for you to remember from tonight is the anchor meal. Because an anchor meal will have a serving of protein, the right size serving for you, a serving of starchy carbohydrates, you get to eat carbs, and a serving of fibrous carbohydrates. So if you were sitting at home or in a restaurant, it would look like, here's my chicken breast or fish or lean steak, then here's my baked potato or rice, some kind of a nice carbohydrate, and then your salad or vegetable, something like that. Now I am assuming that you guys are interested in eating somewhat healthy, so even when I mention these different types of foods, think in terms of best quality. Because I've done work for restaurants on menu planning and so forth, and I was pretty stunned to find out that some salads, like a small house Caesar salad, can have, the first one that I ever checked out had 75 grams of fat. Isn't that amazing? Like you guys who have weighed, measured, tracked food, 75 grams of fat in a small salad. So think in terms of quality, but an anchor meal is a pretty solid meal. Now, most of you who have dieted in the past would consider that you're not going to eat like that 6 times a day, where you have a full serving of starchy carbohydrates and so forth. But that's your meal, whether it's lunch or dinner, one time a day, when you feel like you need to sit down and relax and enjoy a good meal, that's your anchor meal. I kind of like it for most people to be at dinner time, evening meal, because that's when you go home and, if you can relax, that's when you can kind of wind down and you get to enjoy it more. I think when we're busy during the day, it's a little easier to eat lighter. I really don't like physically to eat heavy meals during the day. I don't want to eat lunch and then feel all gross and tired and lethargic all afternoon. So I would much rather, have my bigger meal at night, and then I feel pretty filled up and I'm not hungry. I'm kind of a snacker, especially because I'm not dieting right now. If my body needs energy, I feel like I want to eat. But it's very common for me to go home and eat dinner, and then a couple hours later, sometime in the evening, I'm really hungry and I need a snack. Last night, one of my daughters made a fruit pizza. And yeah, I love that stuff. I love sugar in general, even if it's from fruit. It's sweet, it tastes good. And so she was really proud of that and happy, and so we had that before dinner. So that was a pretty heavy carbohydrate source. Then my wife made spaghetti. And she knew I had that fruit pizza, so she said, you can wait for a while. She knows my eating patterns. I don't want to be full. And I said, well, let's just have it now so we can eat as a family. So I had that, and because I had a pretty full meal there, guess what? I didn't eat the rest of the night. I just wasn't hungry. So if you have that anchor meal, instead of thinking, wow, that's just too much food, sometimes being filled up is a really good thing, because then not only do you feel more stable, less hungry, but it's going to keep you out of the kitchen and so forth. But the next type of meal that you want to incorporate in your day, let's say you're not going to have that full of a meal, is maybe just protein and starch. Not every meal. Some people love vegetables. It's kind of hard for most people to carry those kind of things around. And so if you just have a starch and a protein source, for me, that may look like up in my office, just a sandwich. 2 slices of whole wheat bread or some kind of a wrap of some sort, and some lean meat. And so that there's a protein, and that can be sometimes my mid-morning snack. That's what I call a core meal. Anchor meal, one a day, that's anchoring your day. A core meal, you're thinking it's got everything I need. I've got the protein to maintain my metabolism and lean body mass, but I also have the starchy carbohydrates there. So I'm going to get one of those a day. And for some people, if your metabolism is really high, you might need 2 of those a day, but that's a core meal. I'm going to help you kind of integrate this in your day as we get through them. Another meal might be what I would call a replenish meal. Think of, especially if you work out at all, and you know that you need protein, the amino acids for lean body mass repair, recovery, things like that. So if you have protein and then just a fibrous carbohydrate, we have coined that a replenish meal, because you're getting what you need there, the protein, to kind of replenish yourself, but it's really not a big meal, right? If you have just a chicken breast salad, just the fibrous carbohydrate and protein, and nothing else, that truly is a decent-sized meal for most people, but because there's no starchy carbohydrate there, that's not going to last you all day. So consider right now that we've got 3 pretty decent meals. An anchor meal with protein, starch, and fiber. So that's going to be your big meal today. You have a core meal where you get protein again, and a replenish meal where you get protein. But those 2 meals differ in that one has a starchy carbohydrate, one has a fibrous carb. So the starchy carbohydrate is going to give me more accessible blood sugar, more energy. So it's probably best for me to plan that in my day where I feel I can use the energy best. So that's why for me, it's a mid-morning snack, because I work out in the early afternoon, between noon and 1 o'clock. So I want to have a decent amount of carbohydrates in my system for that workout. If I were going to have an anchor meal in the evening and then have a core meal right before that as kind of an afternoon snack, then I'm bunching up those carbohydrates, right? I'm giving those, back-to-back starch meals, and that may leave my morning pretty hungry because all of a sudden I'm not getting much carbohydrate in the morning, and I may miss that. You also can use a core meal at breakfast. That's another, somebody mentioned breakfast earlier when we were talking about meals, and that can be a place where you want that as well. You guys, breakfast is one of those things that I know everybody thinks is important, and it is, but what do you consider a good breakfast? Besides, like, Fruit Loops and Fruity Pebbles.
Bacon, eggs.
Bacon and eggs, so big hearty breakfast. My wife agrees with you. She makes my kids things like that every morning, like hash browns and things like that. So,
Oatmeal.
Oatmeal, so there's a good carbohydrate, complex
Oatmeal
carbohydrate.
with 2 heaping tablespoons of walnuts in it.
Walnuts, right?
My skim milk, but I have to have my blueberries on top, and then I have a protein source in there because then it's not all carbs. I have protein.
Right, so you put protein powder in the oatmeal. That's very common, very good. So you're getting a protein and a carb, and so that's a core meal. So that's great way to start the day. So you would be kind of spreading those out in my scenario of those 3 meals. So that leaves us some gaps. It is not wrong to eat less frequently. That's what I do like about the intermittent fasting craze, is that has gotten people away from thinking they have to eat every 3 hours. You can go for 4 or 5 meals after, or 4 or 5 hours after a pretty solid meal. There's no reason not to. One of my clients from California was shocked. He thought I mistyped when I said, yeah, on the weekend sometime if we're working out in the yard, it's not uncommon for me to not eat for 12 hours. I'll eat breakfast and I come in at night when it's getting dark, after I like landscaping and things like that. He's like, yeah, he thought I had mistyped that because you couldn't possibly live for 12 hours. You would have to just die if you didn't have food. Because he's in that mentality of you have to eat every 2 or 3 hours. And, that addresses a couple things. Number one, the mindset factor. If you're just not thinking about food, sitting around, thinking about, what's in the refrigerator and so forth, it can make a world of difference. But also, if the meals you do have are very stable, if they're giving you stable blood sugar, because it's a complex carbohydrate in a complete meal, like a protein source and carbohydrate. But the other meals I want to talk about very quickly are, there's something I like to call a recovery snack. This one is optional, because again, some people can do fine eating just 3 or 4 times a day. So they don't need all of these options. They can have a little bit bigger meals, a little bit more starch with a core meal. You don't have to get into that grazing mentality. But what I would have maybe at night is something I would consider a recovery snack, which is just protein only. I don't know if you guys have ever done this just to make a protein shake. It's just protein. Or make a little egg white omelet, something like that. Or just some protein, because you've been taught that carbohydrates are the bad guy. So some of us who have gone through any type of ketogenic dieting have eaten protein alone. That can be okay just to just put something in your stomach so you're not hungry. But what happens if you truly are hungry, physiologically hungry, it's not just that your stomach's empty, it's that your blood sugar is getting low. And I can tell you, you can fill your stomach full of protein. You could eat 16 chicken breasts in one sitting, and you can still be hungry, like starving, because your blood sugar is low. So as part of what I would consider a recovery snack, instead of protein only, it's a half a serving of protein and half a serving of a starchy carbohydrate. So it might be that protein powder and oatmeal, but half a scoop of protein powder and maybe just a quarter of a cup or a third of a cup of oatmeal. That can be a nice little recovery snack. I almost, in our book, called it an emergency snack, but I didn't want to kind of give that mindset of it's a crisis. Emergency, you gotta eat. So the final 2 snacks we're going to talk about, or final 2 meals, are your pre-workout and your post-workout meals. Okay, now if I say you're going to have a pre-workout meal and a post-workout meal, what does that mean you're going to have? That means you're going to have a workout, yes. You guys that went over a couple of your guys' heads. You're already thinking food. I don't know. What am I going to have for my pre-workout meal? You're going to have a workout. So it's incredibly important. One of the most important things that we can learn about today's society, why 50% of America is going to be obese by 2030, is that we live in a cubicle world now. I mean, I think about this for a second. How many of you went to your car this morning? It may have even been in the garage. You didn't have to go outside. You drove to work. You got to work. You got back in your car. You drove maybe here. You're going to get in your car. You're going to drive back. All we do is drive to different seats. That's all we do. Even if we're at home, we walk out of our house, off of our couch, to get on our riding lawnmower, and then we come back in and get back on the couch. And we just go from chair to chair to chair. And so more than ever, we have to have planned, intentional exercise. And you know us, we love that stuff, right? Some of you guys may hate it. And I don't care, you still have to do it. Just like eating your vegetables, taking your vitamins, drinking enough water, even if you don't like water, you just have to do it. It's the number one thing to prevent heart disease, to prevent cancer, osteoporosis. It just has to happen. So find something you like and just absolutely engage in it. Even if your likes and dislikes change. I used to own a gym, and it cracked me up, but I learned to love these people who would come into the gym hating it. I mean, you ever been around somebody doing something they hate to do? It's just not pleasant. You know, they don't like being there. And so you may not like being there with them because they're not happy. But they still came night after night after night to get on the treadmill with a book. They do something. And it's fantastic because even if it's not their favorite thing to do, we all have things like that, but we have to do them. So your pre-workout and your post-workout meal. Here's where you get to have a little fun because you get to use a lot of calories sitting at rest. Right now, you guys are burning 50 to 75 calories an hour. You can burn 10 times that by exercising. That's a pretty big amount of food. You add that up 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, that is a lot of extra food you get to eat all year long. Add up how much food you get to eat for all of next year if you just went from not exercising to exercising. I would do that just for the food. I know a lot of people. I will too. More cheesecake. I gotta talk to you, Kristen. You have cheesecake run pretty soon. Okay. Got my Caesar kind of under the table bootlegger. Goes to Louisville, gets us a cheesecake factory. Okay, but that's the kind of food that I like to use pre-workouts because just like priming a pump, when you exercise, when you train, you're using carbohydrates. And that's where you can use a little bit of just carbohydrate alone or just sugar alone, and it's actually better for you than a big complex meal. If I have a complex carbohydrate, heavy protein load, that's in my stomach, it's digesting, and I decide I'm going to go run 5 miles, how am I going to feel? So even people who come to us, we have marathon runners, triathletes who say, okay, I need to really talk about my event meals. How do I plan, breakfast and snacks and, leading up to that huge event? And I always say we need to create that stability, but then you have to understand that what you have in your bloodstream, your liver, your muscle tissue is so transient. It's so short term. You have to have energy coming in at regular intervals. So that's why they have Gatorade stations and things like that. We're not going to run marathons, so at least I'm not, so you guys can. But so instead of running for 3 or 4 hours, if I want a really good, hard 30, 45, 60-minute workout, I can give my body just a nice surge of carbohydrates. This is our pre-workout meal. So you guys who've been around me, let me hear it. What's my typical pre-workout meal?
Reese's peanut butter.
Reese's peanut butter cups, yes. I have an entire drawer in my desk dedicated to just Reese's peanut butter cups. It is a thing of beauty. But I only eat those pre-workouts. You will never see me stressed out in the afternoon with just Reese's wrappers flying everywhere because I'm having a stress binge. I might do other things, but for some reason, at least habit alone is ingrained in me that those are pre-workout because that's serious business. I'm going to go train. It's going to be hard work. I need the Reese's. I mean, that's what that's for. That's my tool. And so I have a self-contained Great source of energy. It's got a little fat, a little protein, a good amount of carbohydrates. I don't eat 4 Reese's. It's always 2. I used to get the big cups, and I kind of felt like I was cheating myself because I actually wanted 2. I want to eat 2 of them. So I go back to the regular packages now. But then your post-workout meal, that's where you can extend body fat loss, body fat burning, if you have a protein alone snack. So if you guys work out at night, I know some of you come in here for some training and you go home and that could be your anchor meal. It's not bad to have carbohydrates after you work out because your body needs them and it will use them. You're not going to convert them to body fat. But if, like me, you train in the afternoon or the morning and you're going to have other meals later that you can get filled up on, it's not a bad trick to eat protein alone because that immediately starts recovery. That gives you some amino acids to get into your bloodstream, and you still extend body fat loss. You guys have heard that after exercise, you still burn body fat for hours afterwards, right? If you eat a ton of carbohydrates after you work out, you will use that energy first. Remember metabolic positioning? Okay? If my body is in full body fat burning mode, which it is in after I work out, and then I eat a bunch of carbohydrates, I'm now giving my body everything it needs, so I don't have to burn body fat. So a trick is after I work out, I've had my Reese's or another small indulgence. You guys might not want to start with something quite so powerful. You know, start with maybe half of a Reese's peanut butter package. But then have protein alone after you're done. You'll start replenishing your body, recovering better, and you still burn body fat for hours after. Then you can have a core meal or an anchor meal later. So does that make sense to you guys? Okay. I'm going to wrap up the recording part of this just so we can have some Q&A here with our own group soon. But I just wanted to emphasize those 5 again. Your anchor meal, right? Protein, starchy carb, fibrous carb. A core meal, or 2 if your metabolism can sustain it, which is a protein and a starchy carb. A replenish meal, which is half a protein serving, half a carb serving, which kind of begs the question we can get into later, what's a serving size? Or just protein alone. Then a recovery meal, which would be more, I'm sorry, that's actually the half and half. The replenish is protein and fiber. Then the recovery is the half and half. Then we've got the pre-workout, which is carb alone, and then the post-workout, which is protein alone. So we're going to talk about that in a couple minutes to wrap up, but I want to give you guys just a little bit of information because these just came in. Anybody know about our new magazine where you can find information like this? So we, of course, are the founders of the TheDietDoc company. Locally here in Evansville, Indiana, here we are. We do consulting, we do classes, we do lectures, we do all kinds of stuff. One of the most fun things we do is we teach other people to do what we do. So we have almost 40 clinics around the world. We actually went into 2 new countries this month, Japan and California. You guys actually got the joke. I was worried somebody might not get that. Okay. I was afraid my 10-year-old daughter would be in here and she would she's not, Dad, you're wrong. But we do all kinds of training and helping them, and one of the things we've done is we've started producing a magazine where some of our best articles and information, we write for other magazines, we write, some of our articles get translated into German and Asian publications. We've written for other magazines for decades, and finally I thought, why are we doing that? Why don't we just create our own magazine that's better than everybody else's, and so we can give the best information all in one source. So this is what this is. If you guys are interested in top-level, evidence-based, great nutrition, training, health information, really fun stuff, then that's what we've got here. And our second issue just came out today. So subscribers, you'll be getting those soon.